All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. We're really honored that you have joined us for this afternoon's Cando's Links to Learning presentation. I am super excited because we got one of my gals, Aubrey. She has been co-hosting this webinar with me for a couple of months, and so I felt like we got to know each other really well, and I'm really excited to learn about what she is doing, what work she's part of. So we're going to hear about that this afternoon. So welcome, welcome. First and foremost, I think it's important to acknowledge, the land in which we live on. I know that we're gathering virtually, so we're all coming from all over the place here in Turtle Island. My name is Michelle Nevadomi. I am joining this webinar from Treaty 6 territory, Amiskwaciwâskahikan, Edmonton, Alberta. Always important to acknowledge where we are, where we live, where we call home. I am a guest actually to this land. I'm originally from Treaty 4 territory. So I'm just an honor to be able to be here. So thank you for joining us. We just want to give a shout out also to Creator for the gift of another day, a gift of an opportunity to come together virtually, to listen, to learn, to be inspired. Looking very much forward to today's conversation. So the conversation is Indigenous Clean Energy and Indigenous peoples who are the strongest, the country's, let's say that, the country's strongest clean energy leaders. And I think that that's so true. I always believe our people are stewards, good stewards of this land. So really looking forward to today's presentation. So our speakers are Terri Lynn. She is a proud First Nations Mi'kmaq woman from Listigouche, in the province of Quebec, where she was born and raised. So she brings many qualities to her work, including her understanding of First Nation realities and passion for Indigenous involvement in a just transition. So in 2019, she joined the ICE team as the Director of Communications and Strategic Partnerships. Her role focuses on building relationships with key partners to amplify the impact of Indigenous clean energy in Canada. And our next guest speaker, our co-speaker, co-presenter is Aubrey Ann. She's a 21-year-old Cree woman from Canoe Lake Cree First Nation on Treaty 10 territory and connected to Little Pine First Nation on Treaty 6 territory through her father's family. So as a fourth-year commerce student majoring in finance at the Edwards School of Business in the University of Saskatchewan, she aspires to work with Indigenous communities on sustainable economic development projects. So within her campus, Aubrey has been on the Edwards Business Students Society since her first year in post-secondary, and now holds, check this out, the position of Vice President of Charity, where she is currently implementing an Indigenous initiatives strategy. And then there's a whole list of other things that she is involved in and she's been part of. So we have really two powerhouses that are coming to present to us this afternoon. Just, I think a side note, Aubrey Ann also is the National Student Director, I believe, with Cando. And so she's been part of Cando for several years. She has a very strong voice, a beautiful passion for the work that she does do. So today, what we are gonna learn is what is the Indigenous Clean Energy social enterprise. What is that? And what is their programs? What do they do? What are some of the successful Indigenous clean energy projects across Turtle Island? What's the climate action and what it means to Indigenous communities, and how to get involved and opportunities in the transformation to a clean energy future, right? We are the change. We are the change that we want to see. So when it comes to this whole idea of clean energy. I think knowledge is power, and it's really important to have an understanding, but then also to implement that knowledge to be part of this change. So I'm really, really looking forward to this afternoon's workshop. I will come with some questions, but I invite you to come with some questions or comments. There will be an opportunity at the end. However, feel free to use that chat box. If you have any comments, questions, write it down in the chat box. I will make note of it. All right, so thank you for being here, ladies. I am passing you the virtual mic.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that high energy introduction, Michelle. I certainly needed that boost. So good afternoon from where I am. I am on unceded, unsurrendered Anishinaabe territory, here as a guest in the Ottawa area where the Indigenous Clean Energy headquarters is located. But I am originally from Listuguj, which is in the East Coast, so the Atlantic provinces and part of Mi'kma'ki. So that is where my heart is. And I am so looking forward for this pandemic to be over so that we can all connect and go visit family. But before I get started on today's presentation, I would just like to take a moment to acknowledge, the current state and what's happening and the residential schools victims that didn't make it home in the Kamloops residential school. So if we can just take a moment. Thanks for that. I know that we are definitely in some trying times as Indigenous people in Canada, and working in clean energy and in this space where there's opportunity for real reconciliation with real benefits to Indigenous communities is exciting. And Aubrey and I are here today to share the work that we're doing here at ICE and some of the positive stories like Michelle was mentioning in terms of the impacts that we're having across the country with our Indigenous brothers and sisters. So we have some really good stories here to share. But before we get started, I'm going to invite Aubrey to come up and introduce herself. So yeah, by the way, I am Director of Communications and Partnerships at ICE. And oh, sorry, my phone died. Okay, Aubrey.
Yes, of course. Hello, everybody. Whether you're watching it live right now or watching the recording later on, my name is Aubrey on the Liberty Fobasconius, and I am from Canoe Lake Cree First Nation on Treaty 10 territory, but currently living on Treaty 6 territory and homeland of the Métis, just outside of Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. But as Michelle said, my father's side is from Little Pine First Nation on Treaty 6 territory. So I like to call both of these places home, as I spend a lot of time there and connect back with both of my communities. But I am a full-time student, but I do work also full-time with Indigenous Clean Energy, which is an amazing organization and why I'm so happy to be here. I previously was the events management assistant, and now I'm pretty new to this ICE partnerships coordinator role. But either way, I got to work under Terri Lynn, and so it's been an amazing journey and one that I hope to stay on for a long time.
All right, so we're going to start with our presentation now. Because I'm operating off my phone, I don't know if you could just pull it up, Aubrey, so that we can share your screen. Thank you.
Definitely. I'm just trying to see where I press. There we go.
Awesome. All right, so we can just jump into slide 3, Aubrey, and you can kick it off with an introduction to the organization.
Amazing. So as I said, we work for Indigenous Clean Energy, which, if you haven't heard of it before, Indigenous Clean Energy is a social enterprise based out of Ottawa. And so while as you heard, Terri Lynn and I both live in different areas of Canada. The nice thing about Indigenous Clean Energy is that it spreads all across Canada and Turtle Island. And so we have employees and partners and collaborators from all over. But we have definitely our employee base is all throughout Canada with all different backgrounds. And so it's very inspirational. But we are an Indigenous governed nonprofit organization. And so ICE, basically, we work to advance Indigenous and broader sustainability prosperity by supporting First Nation, Métis, and Inuit clean energy participation in every region of Canada. And we do so through our various different projects, which we'll get into a little bit later on when we go into kind of the summaries of what exactly our programming does and exactly what we're rooted in. Terri, do you have anything else to add?
Sorry, no, good.
Awesome. So looking next at our ICE programming, which I just kind of talked about here, you can see that we operate based on this medicine wheel here. It encompasses all of our ICE programming and branches out into what that means and what we focus on within those different areas. So everything we do at Indigenous Clean Energy is grounded in culture. And we do that because we know that working in business or in the nonprofit sector or in whatever area we go into, we don't have to compromise our Indigenous values as an organization, and that we can bring that into every space that we go into and be proud of that and work that into our different journeys that we do. And so we definitely center on a community focus where we build capacity, foster cooperation, and we and we facilitate collaboration while ingraining culture. It's all things that we're very proud of. And you can see there, close to the middle, just the third circle out, that kind of it shows what exactly all of our programming is, but we'll go into that more in depth a little bit later on into the presentation.
Yeah, and one thing I would just like to note in terms of the ICE programming, if you just go back to the chart, you'll see at the center of the circle is the ICE community. So really, it does come down to the work that we're doing and the people that we are working for and with. That's the heart of it. And based on what their needs are, that's where our programming has evolved to. So I'll send it back to Aubrey, who will walk you through the different programs that we have at ICE.
Definitely. So first here, we have our 2020 Catalyst program. But really quickly before we go into that, Beth, if you can maybe launch that poll that I had mentioned about Indigenous Clean Energy and if people have heard of it. I know there's not many people here, but it's always nice to kind of get data out there, see what people have going on. And so you'll see that Beth is gonna launch a little bit of a poll for us, which is essentially just so that we can get a grasp, because every space we go into, we want to get a little bit of data on who knows about clean energy and who hasn't, or who's heard of our nonprofit. So definitely take the time to answer that, and then we can end the poll.
Yeah, here you go. It is available.
Perfect. So it looks like it's like a yes, which I like to see. Definitely good here. Like to know that the word's getting across. I definitely didn't want to see too many of those no, not yet. So that's really great. So we are going, I think it's about 50-50 between the yes quite often and yes briefly. So definitely good to see, good to know. And so I'm just going to go back to our presentation here, and it likes to be a little bit picky. Okay, perfect. And so looking next at what we have here is the presentation. We have the 2020 Catalyst program, which is a capacity building program at ICE. It's been going on for quite some time now. I think we're going into our 5th year, I believe, Terri Lynn. And so basically what this program does is it enriches Indigenous people's ability to look into clean energy, different capacity building, whether that be land planning, learning from other communities that are doing similar projects, and building off of that together as a group so that they can learn and know that they're not alone in their journey into clean energy. And so we take in different cohorts each year that get to learn and build. And what you'll be able to see if you look on our website is that we have catalysts from all over the country that you can learn from. And so whatever region you're in, you're likely to be able to find somebody that you can possibly connect with and learn from their experiences with ICE as a catalyst and what they're doing now within their communities to keep that going. And so I'm gonna launch this video, and I hope it works, but let me know if there's any problems in the way.
So there's no sound. Do other people hear it?
No, I can't.
Oh no! What is a virtual event without some problems?
You want me to try to play it off my computer?
Yeah, maybe a possible, Terry.
Okay. Let's just see if I can get the sound. Sorry.
As I said, what's a virtual event without some issues? You maybe can hear, even though, like, the thing with working from home is that there's so many people everywhere, so you can hear other people working from home in my household too, so it happens.
I can't get the sound to play on my phone.
What I've found before when I've done a clip is I would have to take my earbuds out and then share my sound. I mean, that sounds a little complicated, but that worked. That was one problem solver that worked for me.
Okay, I'm gonna try to play it without full screening. So let's see if that works too. Are we good?
Hey.
I was fortunate to be a part of the 2020 Catalyst program, and for me that program really opened doors.
Because when I was hired on, the only thing that I knew in this world about clean energy is what I saw on TV or on Facebook.
But I didn't know other people were doing the things that I was looking at.
I didn't know about any of this stuff until I went to the Catalyst program.
When I got hired on, that's what I was thinking, okay, well, how am I going to do it?
Everything's new.
So the 2020 Catalyst program is an incredibly powerful program. It has produced successes all over the country. They are leaders in their community about affecting change, working to clean energy, combating climate change.
When I got into that clean energy project, I was nervous, but once I started meeting these people from across Canada, First Nation, Inuit, Métis, I got excited. Now I'm not alone.
We know many of you have traveled here from a long way.
Altogether, it's just an amazing program to help build relationships, connections, both to share what we've learned and learn from other people along the way.
60 of us with the mentors were working together and learning and sharing.
Help First Nation communities come together so that we can learn from each other. Help on the project management side, on understanding about what clean energy is, how to go about producing it, and bringing people outside of their communities to other communities where they can see that, holy smokes, they can do it, we can do it.
The ICE network is a benefit of the Catalyst program. We're limited with our resources in our isolated communities, and so when you pool it together, that's where the value comes from. Because you have kind of people in each community that are wanting the same thing for their own communities. It seems like there's like 5 different questions that pop up every day where you don't even really know how you would go about answering those questions, and then the ICE network's there almost like a big brother.
There's an opportunity for clean energy to come in and help our people to be self-sufficient.
When I hit that ground with the rest of the 20 Catalysts, I felt part of a bigger picture. Once I got through the 3 weeks, it was intense, it was a lot. It was early morning, late evening, learning about wind, solar, geothermal, energy efficiency.
What's really, truly enjoyable is to see these young people who really want to affect change, are working hard for their communities to accomplish the change that needs to happen in their community on climate change.
Great. So this is going to be connected to the solar panels?
Yeah, in Gull Bay First Nation, we're implementing a solar battery energy storage microgrid integrated with the diesel Hydro One remote microgrid to offset about 25% 120,000 liters of diesel fuel a year.
Pretty awesome milestone today.
Milestone, yeah.
Ready
First solar panel ever in the community.
Indigenous communities are leading the way to implement renewable energy projects across Canada, and it's programs like the 2020 Catalyst that help us towards a post-carbon future.
Tesla, we find that there's a lot of wastage in just development, and so we're just trying to repurpose that wood that is otherwise just pushed up and burned, and it's heating homes and buildings, and it's no longer just going up in the air, putting that energy to work.
In Gaspésie, territory of Quebec, it's quite windy here. We are the Saudi Arabia of wind in Canada. So the project's been in effect since December 1st, 2016. That was the official date that the switch was turned on and we started creating electricity. If you think about 2,000 megawatts in wind energy in the Gaspésie, that's a significant amount of money.
I was drawn to the Catalyst program because I firmly believe that clean energy is going to restore our local self-reliance, our energy independence as a platform upon which we can build food sovereignty and economic development.
The Catalyst program was so world-changing.
I felt charged at the end of it. I felt like I had the fair share of information, but as well as groundwork. Now let's go see how to implement this into our communities. And I'm not, in this program, I'm not learning from mainstream society, so to say, but First Nation mainstream society, Indigenous mainstream society. So what's happening on the grounds in other communities that are relevant to my community.
This is the E-House. It's arrived. What a beauty. I would say to anyone interested in coming to this program that you will not lose out. You're going to gain something. You're going to gain more than you ever thought you'd gain, both in relationships and knowledge.
My favorite thing about being up here is the view. It's amazing, like you can see so far.
I still get just a whole great bunch of warm, tingly feelings when I watch the video. Our 2020 Catalyst, this is the 5th cohort that we have. It would have been in 2020, the 5th cohort. So there would have been over 100 catalysts from across Turtle Island, whether that's youth, we have elders, we have women, we have former chiefs or chiefs council members. So everybody, like there's all kinds of different community members that have gone through this Catalyst 2020 training program. And for myself, I was actually a mentor since 2016 because of the experience that I had as project director for a 150 megawatt wind farm that is owned by 3 Mi'kmaq communities in the Gaspésie. So Listuguj, Gaskabegiak, and Gaspag, and their partner owned that project, and I miss it, and I got to see a bit of it on the presentation as well. So that is one of the amazing things about ICE and our community, is that everybody kind of becomes like family. So thank you for sharing that video, Aubrey, and I'll let you continue on.
Of course. And so, like I said, I joined ICE not too long ago, just over a year now. And what I hear every time I hear about the Catalyst program is that it turns into a family. And so you can see that here is that this family, it's not a small one, it's actually a big one. And that's why we're leaders in clean energy and are able to be those stewards of the land. So moving next, we're going to talk a little bit here about the ICE network. And so when we talk about the ICE network, I want you to think about Facebook and then think about switching that as a platform for us to talk about clean energy. And that's exactly what the ICE network does. It's a free online community that brings together individuals with a shared interest in Indigenous clean energy projects in the community. And this virtual space is where we share information, knowledge, resources, we support others' projects, and we connect with others working in clean energy, and we learn about what's going on all across the country. And so ICE's mission is really to be collaborative, and that's the ICE network really really drives that home. And as of this past year, we have about over 1,200 members. And so it's definitely something that if you're not already on it, it's a space that you should get on, and a place to learn. And we reach milestones in that space all the time. And there was new potential as we partnered with Indigenous Services Canada, as well as Cando, for open forums that support Indigenous homes initiatives. And so it's a space that definitely you can all be on and join for free. And I'll make sure to put the link in the chat as well for you to be able to get on there as well.
Just one more thing I would add. Every month on the ICE Network, we host a monthly webinar on clean energy topics. So we'll have other Indigenous communities that have expertise to share. It's often hosted by one of our 2020 Catalysts or one of our team members here at ICE. And it's just conversations and panels where people are able to get information. And those are also posted on the ICE Network and available for anybody to listen in if they're curious about a particular subject. So that service is available on the ICE Network as well.
Yes, definitely. Moving on next to some of our other programming is that we have the ICE Global Hub as well. And so ICE's Global Hub is an expression that 476 million Indigenous people around the world can and should play a central role to catalyze a just and sustainable transition to a clean energy future. And so that's super inspiring, because moving forward, it promotes that global Indigenous clean energy, cooperation, giving the force behind the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People through Indigenous clean energy leadership and community clean energy enterprises. And so a 2020 highlight from this past year is that Three Island Energy, which is an initiative of the Global Hub, was launched in fall of 2020, and it focuses on an approach to scaling up renewable energy microgrids through community ownership and partnerships in Indigenous communities, island, coastal, and communities unconnected to electricity power grids. So definitely great initiatives there. And moving forward with the Global Hub as well, another initiative that we have coming forward is called Decolonizing Power. And that's a podcast that we have coming out with two hosts. We have Freddie, who is a staff member of ICE, and we also have James Harper, who was one of our 2020 Catalysts in the past. And so together, they speak about the unparalleled potential of renewable energy microgrids in Indigenous, island, coastal, and remote communities, and their efforts to decolonize power as a whole. So definitely keep an eye out for that. It is launching next week. And so if you're interested, please look on our socials and look on Apple Podcasts as well, and you'll be able to find it. Looking also at bringing it home, I'm not going to go too into depth, because we're going to talk more about efficient homes moving forward. Terri Lynn will take that over. But bringing it home is an Indigenous-led initiative that enables and implements healthy energy efficiencies, efficient homes and facilities to First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities. The initiative supports these communities to embed practices, approaches, and policies that will create long-term and sustainable improvements to housing. And so what you can see there on that little map is those are our guide communities, ones that Terri Lynn will also touch on, but definitely ones leading the change that we can learn from moving forward. Now, the gathering, I always like to talk on this because it's kind of, it's how I first got involved with ICE. And I remember the first time I ever got involved with ICE, I actually was in Ottawa for a Cando event. And I was thankfully messaged by somebody who was one of the 2020 Catalysts, Jordan Burnoff. And she had mentioned to our group who was on the youth panel that there was this big event, and it was fun and it was collaborative, and you could get to know Indigenous people from across Canada. And so my group and we decided, why not take a chance and go out and meet some people? And I'm glad that I did, because the gathering is exactly what she said. It was an interactive, collaborative space where you can meet passionate Indigenous people from around the country that were talking about clean energy energy in a way that you knew we were the leaders of it. And for me, that was so inspiring because I was just this small town Saskatchewan Indigenous woman who didn't know a lot about clean energy, but knew that that was something that I wanted to work in one day. And thankfully, I met Chris Henderson there, who is our executive director, and he is wearing this brown hat. And to this day, I'll forever remember that because he was the one who made me get out of my chair and talk to people. And that's what ICE is all about. It's about getting out of your comfort zone and meeting people to be able to create a just transition to a clean energy future. And that's what the gathering does. And this year, although we couldn't gather in person to do the same things that we did in Ottawa, we were able to bring this to a virtual platform where we brought over 660 attendees together from 15 different countries with 55 plus speakers and 37 sessions where we could talk about clean energy and what it means moving into the future so that we could really get people inspired and continuing doing what they're doing, even though we couldn't gather in person. And so definitely something I would also recommend for people to attend.
And so awesome. I love it when we get to have these moments of reflection and remember the good old days when we used to gather in person.
Definitely. Yeah, but I'll pass it over to you, Terri, to take over from here.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, so I guess, after we hear about all of the different programs that are offered at ICE, there's a lot of work. I mean, we began with the 2020 Catalyst program and everything else sort of naturally evolved from the conversations that we're having with people. And for myself, like I had mentioned, I was the project director for the 150 megawatt wind farm. And, one of my greatest goals at that point in my career, what I had wanted to do with that was to take that success that we had and to duplicate it over and over again in every community, so that we can help Indigenous communities take over, start being independent and get some own source revenues into their bank accounts so that they can start governing as independent nations, which is so important. So for the project that we worked on, so the 3 Mi'kmaq communities, they came together and they said, we're going to build a 150 megawatt wind farm. And that's not a small thing. So to give you an idea in terms of 150 megawatts, I know when I first started talking energy, I had no idea. My former boss would be going on about this many megawatts, and I was like, I don't know. But 150 megawatts is enough to power 27,000 homes. So it's very significant. But the way that we structured our agreement with Hydro-Quebec, who is our purchaser of this electricity, of this clean energy, was that we were not connecting our communities. We were actually selling the electricity back to Hydro-Quebec. So this project actually, in turn, brings over $222 million to these 3 Mi'kmaq communities over life of the power purchase agreement, which is 20 years. Now that's significant. This money is going to go into, however the communities still have to decide how they want to share that. But the whole intent behind it was that it was there to be able to rebuild our nation, to be able to make decisions for our communities, to be able to identify the needs and to be able to serve those needs of our communities. Also, there was some direct benefits that happened on the employment side of things. When we went into construction, it ran over a 2.5-year period, and we wanted our Mi'kmaq people to be working at these projects. We wanted our children and our grandchildren who are going to be here for the life of this project to be able to say, you know what, my dad built that, or my mom worked there, or my auntie, or whatever the case is. So we, in parallel to the development of this project, which is really important, we began the training initiatives with our community members. So while we didn't even have a project, and it's kind of a funny story, but at the end of it, we were able to get this power purchase agreement secured. We were also able to get training programs in place to put 116 Mi'kmaq workers to work on the project, which was the first time in the province of Quebec that it's happened. My father has been an iron worker all of his life and worked all over Canada and the United States, but never once in our own province where we lived because of the barriers that were faced. So we worked really, really hard to make sure that the doors were open and that our people were able to take those steps to get those jobs, to do the work that was so important, and to have that ownership and that pride that comes with it, right? So as we're moving on, and I just have a couple of pictures from the project there, but when we're looking forward in terms of what's next, what we need to do and what we really need to recognize as Indigenous people in this country is that we are the largest owner of clean energy assets aside from Crown and public utility. I don't even think that we know that about ourselves, right? When I read it, and it's based on facts and research and evidence, so we know, and I'll talk more about the numbers to show you, but I just get the chills because we don't even realize that we're doing it, and we need to be loud and proud about this because there's so much opportunity that lays ahead, especially as we're talking about, you know, how we're going to build back better in this post-COVID climate. Where are we going in terms of the climate targets that we have and all of, you know, the work that has to be done as stewards of the land to protect Mother Earth, to ensure the sustainability for the next 7 generations and to help get us to net zero. So, you know, when we're thinking about that, some of the numbers that I'd like to share with you is that in terms of ownership of clean energy projects across Turtle Island, Indigenous communities own 197 of them that are over 1 megawatt in size, and their ownership, we're trending close to 45% ownership of these projects. So that's really big to say that Indigenous communities are now developing and owning, you know, clean energy projects that are having these significant returns, is a really good thing to be a part of. It also provides much needed jobs for our community members, and it also stimulates the economy for our local entrepreneurs, our Indigenous entrepreneurs that have opportunities to feed into the supply chain. So we're doing it, and what's coming up and the conversation and the push to where we're going, number one is about our houses. In Indigenous communities, the housing situation, I know, you know, I can speak for myself when I go home for the holidays, and in terms of, you know, how it is living in the city versus living in community, the dust, the mold, the mildew, the, you know, things that happen as our houses age. So really, when we're having a conversation with, you know, our ICE community members about energy, the number one thing that they're asking about is, well, what about in our houses? The cost of heating, the cost to run electricity, it's unaffordable. It's very hard on our elders and on low income people. And, you know, we need to do things to be able to make sure that our houses are built right, that they're ventilated right, and that we are providing that healthy space for families who may not have an option. They have to live, you know, overcrowded or whatever the case is. So another thing that's really important to know is that, you know, in communities, housing is one of our biggest employment drivers that we have. You know, every year there's always a round of carpenters that are hired and laborers. So, you know, there's a real opportunity here to just get the right investments in place so that we can start doing the retrofits that are needed, the upgrades, and doing the builds so that our houses are energy efficient and that they're reducing their emissions. So if you look at what the needs are in terms of investment, because this is going to be one of our biggest challenges, you know, if we break it down in terms of the minor retrofits, the major retrofits, and the new builds that are needed by 2030, to make sure that Indigenous people have adequate housing, it's $5.3 billion worth of investment that's needed. So we've been lobbying the federal government, you know, by writing papers and pushing so that they're able to put the money into the hands of the Indigenous communities that need to do this work and that want to do this work for their community members. So just to give you an idea there in terms of how important it is and the cost of it. Another emerging opportunity lies in electric vehicles. So when you hear the government talking about, you know, they're going to stop the sale of gas using vehicles by 2030 or 2050, each of the provinces have different targets now, but there is an opportunity here for Indigenous communities to get the infrastructure in place to be able to own and operate and provide services for EVs in the future. So, you know, there's pictures here. I mean, everything is turning electric. We even have big dump trucks. I'm a little excited. I know for me, I'm holding off on buying my next vehicle because I do want to get an EV, and I'm just sort of waiting for the whole market thing to crash or whatever's happening with this pandemic. But yeah, there's definitely opportunity. I know one of the things that we talk about over here is having an electric highway going through Indigenous communities throughout Turtle Island, where people are, stopping to charge their EVs in communities, and that stimulates the local economy. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity there for people to investigate more. I know that in New Brunswick, NB Power is working with communities to install some charging stations. So, there's definitely room more from just charging stations, but I just wanted to put that out there. And then we have, targeted renewables. Right now, the government is really working. They've just dedicated a couple more $1 million to getting communities off diesel. I know that I've worked with a remote community in northern Quebec where they're going to be eliminating their total reliance on diesel to heat their homes in the winter. Well, then their winter runs from probably October until June. It's a very short summer season for them. So a 7 megawatt run of the river project is going to replace all of the diesel that they need. So there's a lot of communities that are, diesel reliant and that need to make that shift to get off of the dirty oil. So that's one of the focus areas. Also eliminating coal. There's also hydrogen. There's different things, different technologies, and I'm just learning about this as we're going. But one of the points that's worth mentioning here, and then behind the meters, is that when we think about clean energy and renewable energy projects, we often think wind, solar, biomass, the typical big development projects that are out there. But what we need to understand is that there's a whole spectrum of opportunities that exist for clean energy. And it's not only in the renewable projects. There's also, I'm just going to pull this up, sorry. As I'm talking, I'm looking here. So I did touch on the green energy infrastructure. So that's stuff like transmission, diesel reduction, microgrids, the electric economy, and green transportation. So that's one area. Another one in the energy efficiency and conservation. So we did talk about community housing facilities and infrastructure and technologies in these services. And then we can think about these advanced energy systems, which is IT systems, bioenergy, smart grids, or energy storage. So when you're creating energy at a wind farm and it's not available, or the grid doesn't have a demand for it, how do you store that energy? How does the sun store the energy if they don't need it and they only need to use it at night? Those things, the technology around that, there's definitely opportunities that you're going to hear more and more about with Indigenous communities partnering on that. And then we have our renewable energy projects. So the hydro, solar, wind, and geothermal that are typically tied to provincial grids. I know it's a lot of information and it can be overwhelming, but one of the things that we want to do is just encourage, if you have questions, or if you so I'm going to stop because I know I said a lot, and just see if there's any questions right now before we continue. I know it's a lot of words, so if everybody's good, the last slide that we have here is, how do we get there? What's it going to take? So number one, financing mechanisms, of course, funding. Even for us, we are a not-for-profit social enterprise, and we rely on, grant contributions or partners that are going to fund the work that we're doing, because we're not funded by the federal government. But yes, financing mechanisms to be able to do the work in the communities, to be able to leverage and use that as your equity as project owners. We also need the capacity building. So programs like the 2020 Catalyst, I think, are really awesome. And even the work that you're doing here at Cando and all over, where we're actually we're learning in a different way. We're learning by being on the land, and we're learning from each other. And I think that there's a lot of power there. Because I can almost guarantee that if there's a question about clean energy and you come and talk to somebody in the network, you're going to get your answer. And that capacity building and creating that awareness is so important, because as Indigenous people, we're often working in our communities wearing many hats, and we don't have opportunity or time to look at what's happening out there. So that capacity and building that knowledge, that mentoring and having those networks at ICE, everybody that goes through the 2020 Catalyst program gets a mentor. We also offer mentorship services too. We just had a call for services if a community needed some mentorship or needed to get a project off the ground, then there's sometimes resources that are available from our organization to help people do that. It'll also take, some planning around resource development and the policies from the federal and provincial governments to support this, that go beyond, an Indigenous inclusion clause. We really need to start putting our actions, our words into actions, and allowing for that space for Indigenous communities to be prosperous partners in this, because we are already doing it and we just have to keep on doing more of that great work. So that's all that I have for now. If there's no questions from the audience, I wanted to acknowledge that Marianne did say that she was working with Vince, who is one of our 2020 Catalysts. So that's so cool. I'm so glad. We always love it when we have some connection. So thank you for sharing that with us, and tell Vince that I said hello.
Wow, so a very, very thorough presentation. Actually, there's a lot to take in. I feel like for me, and perhaps anyone who's kind of wanting to learn more, perhaps a good starting point is to join that ICE network and just, just be part of the conversation. And by being part of the conversation, just being a listener and just paying attention to whatever's being presented. I'm sure there's documents that are being shared and articles that are being shared. So would that be a good starting point for a person who, perhaps wants to learn more?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The icenet.work. I think Aubrey will drop it into the chat. If you haven't registered already, you can make your own profile. So like we said, it's kind of a little bit like Facebook. We're really trying to encourage that collaboration on the online network. We also have a Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter account. So just look up Indigenous Clean Energy and you can follow us there as well, because there's always opportunities, like I had mentioned, the technical services, whether it's the monthly collab, our next gathering that'll be, hopefully we'll be able to make an announcement on once we start traveling, 2020 recruitment. If you want to become a catalyst, how do you get involved? There's all kinds of opportunities. Or if you even want to sponsor us, we're always looking for partnerships. So I really want to thank Cando for allowing us to have this space. I do know that a number of our catalysts are a part of the Cando network. So we do look forward to, when you guys are across the bridge another time, we're going to go and give you guys all hugs too.
Awesome. It sounds like there's lots of opportunity. You are about training, building capacity, building community, and connecting with community, and bridging community together. Thank you so much for sharing, and I really enjoyed the video, listening to some of the stories and the thoughts around this. So I really, really appreciate it. So Marianne, I just, not even to put you on the spot, but just want to create an opportunity if you have any questions or any comments or what it is that you're doing in your community.
Oh no, I don't have any questions. I'm learning about clean energy. I'm a settler from Denmark, and I've been working for 20 years in Indigenous communities, and for the last 10 specifically in communities working around tourism, housing, and economic development, and quite recently clean energy and green energy, which has become so important. So I take as many opportunities as I can to learn, and I've been working in the Newhawk territory since 2014, helping them raise funds for their big house, and now we're working on a college trade center and an elders gathering hall and a wellness wing, which will be part of the complex that houses the administrative building. So clean energy is part of all of that. Oh, as well as the Elders Village. We got funding from Innovation Canada for an Elders Village based on the traditional kind of configuration and way of community that the New Hope traditionally had before we went to nuclear families. So building that village, which is funded separately, and then the Elders Gathering Hall would be the piece that ties everybody together. So the whole clean energy thing and building suddenly to net zero, and also finding sources of clean energy in territory is, you know, it's really, really interesting, and my learning curve is really steep. And I'm working with the Niska Village Gitwin Silk as well. They have a clean energy project. They're trying to do some run of the river stuff up by Anyok's mine. Yeah. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, it is. It's really, really exciting, and it's interesting because my first foray into working basically grant writing was in the social service end of the Indigenous communities, which is really, really intense in a different kind of a way. So this is very exciting and forward-looking, and a nice balance to those parts. Because right now we're all, I work on a missing and murdered Indigenous women's project for the Friendship Center. And so we're all pretty broken up about what's happened in the last few days in Kamloops. And so that stuff's really, really, really intense. And it's nice to go over to the green energy and realize that, you know, like there's hope. There's hope in this country for all of us, for a really good life in the long run. But it's hard.
Thank you for sharing that that feeling, Marianne, because it's certainly, even in the green space sometimes, and the clean space can get heavy as well. And I think that that's part of the work that we are doing, because it is reconciliation. I believe it's reconciliation in action, where, you know, we're talking with the governments, because, you know, the clean energy projects don't happen just with the Indigenous communities. There's a number of partners that are involved, as we all know. So the space is uncharted territory. And that was actually one of my messages at our gathering, where I said, you know, we're trailblazing in this space, and we have to be able to take risks on each other and to build trust, because as Indigenous people, it's all about relationships.
Right.
At the end of the day.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm really glad I was able to join you, and thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you. It was really nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice.
Thank you, Marianne.
Thank you.
I just cannot help but feel a sense of hope. Like this, you know, the clean energy piece is really not in my, you know, scope, and to have a better understanding, and especially having an understanding of our teachings, you know, that we are the stewards of this land, and how do we pave this path for the future generations. And I think this is very much a piece of this. And while our story is very much one of, you know, trauma, grief, loss, colonization, we all also carry that story of leadership, of a strong voice, of being trailblazers. And so this presentation has really you know, instilled some hope. So thank you for sharing, you know, the stories, what some of the communities are doing, and just really, it's all about building the community and making, you know, those communities stronger. So I thank you so much for your presentation. I'm walking away with some good knowledge, some new knowledge, and I really honor you and your voice and the work that you are doing. So I say to you, hi. So thank you so much for lending your voice to today's webinar. I know you're back on Thursday, So we get to hear you again. So thank you all for joining. You know, as we close today's webinar, we do want to take a moment and, you know, acknowledge this beautiful gift of land that Creator has given to us, and what our responsibility is. How do we carry that torch that honors community, that honors the land, that honors people, and honors the generations that haven't been born yet? So we have a big responsibility, but a responsibility and a role that is so possible. So thank you for sharing today. So have a good rest of the day, and be well. Peace.
Thank you.
Namotas.